To Save Civilization from Democracy. By N. D. Wallace Swan. The imposition of mob rule, the ultimate and end result of democracy, damages individual autonomy. It threatens and often eliminates your natural rights, life, limb, and property. We are at whatever mercy the mob grants us, if any. Every time a legislative body meets, all people are on the butcher's block, and all we can do is pray it's not us. Our political power and political effect is completely irrelevant and moot. Our votes amongst the masses provides no security, no authority, no viable alternative to the will of the mob. Even worse, our vote signals our submission to the mob's will, granting them moral authority for whatever actions they press upon us. As time passes in a democracy, more and more of our natural rights are surrendered as the degenerative forces of entropy erode the moral backbones of the defenders of our liberties. In substitute, our mobs emboss shiny papers with seals of guarantees which they grant us, stamped and signed by people long dead and buried, spinning in their graves. In a mob you cannot own yourself, and all you create is at its mercy and whim. If you are lucky, the mob will ignore you. At some point, however, the mob will turn and villainize you, and make a caricature of you. They can destroy you, everyone you love, and all you hold dear, by declaring you evil, or having gained through ill, by their sweat and blood. This won't be true and never need be, but those facts are immaterial to their case. In their resentment and envy there can be no mercies, nor justice, for they are the mob, and resistance is futile. Democracy, especially in its current welfare state form, likes to pretend it's superior to its developing world counterparts with little warlords extracting fees to allow commerce and transit within its territory, but there is little difference. It is simply veiled and hidden behind the taxes which cannibalize the most productive people, while also seeking out and destroying any chance to escape the grasping talons of the tax man. Though many do escape the oppression, the suffocating, relentless, oxygen-starved and brain-damaged mobsters. They who are driven by envy and greed, project such a charge upon productive people, to justify their actions. This resentment and evil, can only be plied by an equivalent volume of intoxicants and sloth, granting the working people respite from the ever-present parasite. For the mob, your private property and life are not yours. And the so-called defenders of your rights slowly but surely surrender yours to this mob if only to temporarily extend their political power. Over time these continuous slow surrenders and retreats accumulate within the bureaucratic framework and system, until oppressive policy changes drown away all economic opportunity, where finally the wellspring from which the whole progressive project runs dry, often followed by a great exodus, spreading the underlying resentment into the world. Though one might imagine that some introspection may be at hand here, it will not happen, and like a gangrenous infection, envy devours all. One should not trust these same fickle structures which once openly and proudly murdered some of our greatest thinkers and spiritual leaders. It took a direct democracy to murder the great Socrates, and a jury to both condemn and then fail to pardon Jesus Christ who died on the cross. Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita warns Prince Arjuna against these demoniac people and ideas. To them, he says, all truth is relative, all goals aim towards the maximization of material pleasures, without regard to expense to himself, others, or society in general. They are trapped in a sort of hell of consumption, while it consumes them. Their time is only considered in this regard, and so they waste much of it through sloth and inebriation. Their life in between pleasures is experienced as pure pain, to which they will pay any price to end, their wealth, their love, their souls. Forever they live in the present, rarely a thought is given to the future. They would burn down their home in the middle of winter to feel the increased warmth, soon to be left totally exposed and doomed. One would think they would do civilization a favor and just die, but they do not, and instead will burn their neighbor's house to feel more warmth. This is how things regress away from civilized life and into brutal barbarism. Soon too, as this destructive psychic prion exhibits its ruinous effect on the civilized, attacking humanity itself in an entropic spiral towards the bestial unconscious. Once the decline begins, great poverty ensues. As the base structures dissolve due to the destruction, ill maintenance, and by an incentive, an infrastructure shortage burgeons forth. Lesser, lower levels of infrastructure start to be used, which is less efficient, slower, and more expensive. In response, the prices of goods and services start to rise relative to the infrastructure efficiency loss. At some point, more invasive and destructive methods of resource harvesting will ensue as the survivors of the interregnum/anarchy scrounge whatever they can however they can for survival. Groups will form, to mutually defend, maintain, and harvest resources and territories, and so a new feudalism forms over time. This feudalism will eventually result in a return to the natural and most stable human political system, monarchy, through the ascension of a strong man, a king. This king will not necessarily need to force his way into power, as the people will bring him forth as their champion of civilization. As you can see, Caesarism is inevitable with democracy. Either the Caesar will come now and prevent the downward slide, or arise once we have bounced up from rock bottom. There is nothing to lose through the ascension of a coming great man, and our whole civilizational infrastructure to salvage. We can always start from zero like we have many times, but we don't need to. It's through this cycle of low-born resentment in which humanity is destroyed. It can only be overcome through the will to power of a heroic great man. Rise, Caesar!